9 a.m. to talk about transport, connectivity, the slightly underdeveloped infrastructure of eastern side or central and eastern side of Europe, and especially the 3Cs initiative, which is private-public partnership to develop those parts of infrastructure. And may I introduce you the panelists here. Mr. Matthew G. Boyse from U.S. Department of State, Mr. Paweł Jabłoński from Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Poland, Mr. Aleš Mihelič, State Secretary from Ministry of Infrastructure of Slovenia, Paweł Nierada, Mr. as well, as you can see, from Bank Gospodarstwa Krajowego, is Mr. Tomáš Pavlíček, HELIOT Group, Mr. Peter Verlič, Slovenian Railways, Mr. Czesław Warsewicz, PKP Cargo, Mr. Matej, Zakonjšek, Transport Community, and also virtually, although I don't think you can see, but we can see, Mr. Tadashi Maeda, Bank of Japan for International Cooperation. So, for a start, one short question, and I'm not giving you any minutes, so because otherwise you would have to be looking at your wristwatch. For state representatives of the state, give me one reason why this kind of investment fund should be attractive to private investors, and why they should invest to 3Cs initiative. And for everybody in the private sector, explain why would you benefit from the political process around it. And so maybe we could just start with from here. So why should private investors be interested?
Well, as we saw from the IMF study that was conducted now a year and a half ago, this was that identified it. This really that took a very, very close look at the economic conditions of the region. They identified enormous potential, enormous growth potential, and this was reinforced by IMF Managing Director Georgieva, who was at the 3C Summit in Sofia just in July. She was very, very bullish about the region and its potential. And in fact, investors from the private sector tell us that actually returns on investment in this region of Europe actually exceed those in Western Europe. So as you look at all the sort of for investors who are, with all this capital out there sort of circling the globe looking for places to land and invest intelligently, this area, according to the IMF, is just very attractive. And so unfortunately, this region was forced to live under communism for such a long time. So there's a lot of Nachholbedarf, as they say in German, a lot of need to catch up, sort of, and a lot of and so this is just just the economic conditions are that the growth is high, the potential is just so great. So I just and if you look at all the sort of the Western approach that 3Cs initiative, for example, is taking towards towards transparent, sustainable principles, that these are very different from the principles that investors that other investors from outside the region, sort of the Chinas and the Russias, etc. They don't invest in the same way, and so the principles that undergird the 3Cs initiative, the Blue Dot Network, and those kinds of best practices, international best practices that are being used for applied under the auspices of the 3Cs initiative, those make it even also attractive because of those best practice conditions.
Okay, Mr. Jabłoński, how would you flatter the private sector so that they would be willing to invest?
It's a very interesting format of this discussion, and I really appreciate that we were asked private and public participants, so to say, questions that actually pertain on the opposite side. Because me as a politician, I'm now being asked to say, why is it attractive for private sector? Private sector is asked to say why the political support is so important. And if I would name one key thing about the fund itself, because about the initiative we could say a lot about the importance of it, about the political meaning, about the implications for security and safety, stability, building connections and north-south axis vis-a-vis the west-east, which was created much earlier. This is obviously hugely important, that's why we decided on it. But we also wanted to add additional angle. These political projects often tend to be focused on high-level leaders organizing things, controlling the process, setting at the agenda, political direction, and then it's obviously very important, political leadership. But there is also a risk of over-politicizing things that should remain purely at the control of a free market, of the private sector. The idea for the 3Cs Initiative Fund is based exactly on that. We wanted to create a tool that will be absolutely separate from the political decision-making process. And if I would be to name one feature that should attract private investors to the fund, is that me and my other colleagues, politicians, have nothing to do with the management of it. Because political angle often, well, it's necessary, but there are certain temptations that all politicians have to fund projects that might not be commercially that viable, but they may serve them in their local constituency and so on. This is not the case with the fund. The fund is managed absolutely independently. We hired a professional management fund to do it, together with the banks, together with the banks that are obviously state-funded. They are stakeholders in, because we want to finance it together with private sector. But we are behind the big, great wall. We don't have any interference with the management. This obviously raises some doubts about with other colleagues, with other politicians from other countries. They say we should have some more influence, but we say, yeah, we can have more influence on other elements of the 3Cs initiative. But when it comes to fund, it should remain independent. It should remain based on free market principles. This is the main positive element, I think, the most positive element for every private investor.
Of course, in my opinion, some people said that it's nothing special. We already have some infrastructure funds, we have private-public relationships, but this one is a little bit different. I think, in my opinion, the basis is, of course, for the private investors that we can offer a great risk-return rate, so the investments are safe. On the other hand, we have 12 to 15% expected profitability range. So the basis is done, I think. But on the other hand, you can expect, if you invest in those projects in the fund, that of course you will get the support of the states. These are the projects which are cross-border projects, or projects which outcome will be a benefit for more than one country. So I think that's a little bit different from other funds. And it's a safe investment, it's a good investment, and overall the outcome will be that our region, where also the investors and the companies are working, will be better, and the gap between the East and the West, I think we will close maybe a little bit more of the gap, and we will be better. We will be in a better position.
Nierada, the politicians around it, is it good?
Is it working actually? It is now. Right. Why don't I take and elaborate what was actually just said? Because we at BGK, we are the Polish Development Bank. We have been one of the in the group of development banks who actually set up the fund. And of course, the fund is politically inspired, if you like. It's a consequence of this brilliant idea, which is the 3Cs initiative, and it's actually broadly following the logic behind the focusing on the three main industries, which are the transportation, the energy, and digital infrastructure. But if I was to say why this is going to be, it actually is attractive to the outside investors, in particular from the private sectors, is because it's going to make money, because the fund is purely commercial vehicle. The purpose of that is actually to become a tool to, of course, the one side of the effect is the positive effect. I would say a substantial positive effect on the economies of the countries in the region. But taking it from the investor's perspective is actually an excellent gateway to benefit from the potential of the region, without taking oversized risks or burden or of effort. In one point of contact, you have an access to all these markets and all this potential of over 120 million people living in this area, delivering the two-digit growth, while actually remaining in a very predictable and safe regulatory framework of European Union. So you can take, you are having the best of both worlds. And of course, it was set up that way. In particular, we have selected a very, very professional, with excellent track record, the project management team, who are very efficient in sourcing excellent investment opportunities and actually executing them. But now we managed to be at this level, at this stage, at this moment in life, that it's not only talking, it's not only ideas, but it actually has become a proven concept. The fund is up and running for over a year, and we all know how difficult, how particular this year is, with all the COVID situation. But despite all these things, the management team of the fund has reviewed over 120 projects, and we have already done 3 investments, incidentally in one of each of the main sectors, which is nice. And we are at the stage that we can demonstrate that actually investors are more and more interestingly knocking on the doors of the fund and talking about how can we invest, how can we do, and incidentally the fund was already joined by the private investor. And I think it's nice to say in this forum that it is an investor from Croatia, so from the Western Balkans, if you like, which was main of the topics yesterday. So I think, in a nutshell, is an excellent tool to give the investors opportunity to benefit from the huge potential of our countries. Within a very structured, transparent, and safe framework.
I think digital infrastructure, it's developing anyways. So why would you need presidents and summits to support your business, which is supposedly good anyways?
I think public-private partnerships and communication within the whole scope of society is very important. So we are digital infrastructure. I have to say we are happy that one of the important investment funds, infrastructure investment funds, Cube, invested money into our infrastructure, the 0G IoT network in 5 countries in Europe. So we are the biggest IoT network in Europe currently. And I see a big potential in central or in the 3 Cs initiative countries, because on one hand there are some things which could be more risky, more costly because of small countries, smaller value of the companies. On the other hand, the markets are not fully consolidated still because of the historical situation, and the return of investment when selecting the right investments could be really, really interesting.
Okay, and we move further to Slovenian Railways and Mr. Verlič.
Good morning. So from our perspective as the rail operator, we clearly see that we have one European Union, but we have 2 transport networks. That's fact. So more developed in the western part of European Union and less developed in the eastern part of Europe, which also covers all these 3 Cs areas. So only way to equalize this transport network is to have money. It's very simple, and I think that the mix of funds, so private, public, I don't know, financial instruments, loans, European funds, everything which helps to, how to say, to raise the quality of infrastructure network is very good for, not for Slovenian Railways, but for the whole region, for the all railways operators, because we can do our job if we have, how to say, reliable transport network, let's say, especially for railways, without administrative obstacles, without technical obstacles. So that is, I think, most important, and I think that also strategic partnerships in companies like Slovenian Railways, we already have in cargo strategic partner that also helps to bring the new fresh money, but of course we have to do our homework also.
Okay.
Okay, just I'm representing the freight sector, railway freight sector, which we are very strongly involved in this region. Because as a PKP Cargo have some subsidiary in Slovenia, Czech, Hungary, Slovakia as well, that we are so very interested to develop and our business and service for the client. For our perspective as a stock exchange company, we need increase business, increase the profitability of the activity. That's this initiative. I think that can be very important for us. We just looks very optimistic because the most important issue is the barrier of the infrastructure. Infrastructure is as a bloodstream of the economy. If you'd like to be really developed, our potential economy develop, we need bloodstream and the infrastructure. If you see, looks for the country which is participating on here from the railway business is a very barrier. Different gauges, different electricity, different safety system, and any cases. It's difficult to go across the border. We have many countries here. This unify and just increase, invest in infrastructure is one of the bottleneck for rapid business, develop business, and this region. That's why if you just improve the infrastructure, I think the business just easy come here and will be compatible for the other rest of the Europe. We have the seaport, we have terminal, we have resources, demographic potential huge, and we need to reconstruct a lot of railway, road, and so on, so on. We would like to invest just to exchange of the goods between Asia, Europe, and other rest of the Europe. That's why if you just try to improve and just avoid the bottleneck of the infrastructure, I think this business on this country will burst. That we so very positive looks for this initiative. If just to improving, investing in infrastructure will be benefits. Every one of us sitting here as a country will be benefit of this project.
Good morning. First of all, I'm representing transport community, which has its focus the Western Balkans. And in that respect, it is an interesting initiative, the 3 Cs, because of its promise of connecting the global north or the north of Europe to the south, and in that respect also to the Western Balkans. But to be very concrete with the answer to your question, I think there are 3 specific reasons that would enhance the attractiveness of the initiative. The first is a very clear project pipeline. So a very clear project pipeline which will be agreed by all participants of the initiative. And also this project pipeline should be in harmony and coordinated with already established financing tools in Europe, such as Connecting Europe Facility. Second, there needs to be even stronger executive arm, business arm that would promote those projects, promote via international financing institutions, other governments, as well as, of course, private investors. And thirdly, I think the most immediate priority should be the cross-border connectivity. And in that respect, specifically the rail connectivity. Thank you.
Okay, and now we move to well, state investor, but not from this region. So, Mr. Maeda. Mr. Maeda? Meada, sorry. Okay.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon from Tokyo. I'm the only participant through that online to this. Yes? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly. So just say what interests you in 3C's project.
Okay, I'm sorry that I'm only participant from online to this event. I was invited by the Polish ambassador in Japan to this event.
Yes, yes, but and thank you for agreeing to be part of this panel.
We have a lot of the experience to make for making a financial support to the infrastructure connectivity project. In 2019, Japanese government hosted.
You are okay. Yes, maybe we should move further and.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can hear perfectly, as if you were here in this room. Yes.
There's some time lag, so that I will speak slowly. It's okay.
Okay, perfect. It's
okay. Okay.
Would you like to add something? It's slightly challenging, but it seems that the virtual connections to Tokyo are not.
All right, JB is played a pivotal, vital role to the infrastructure project, mainly in Asia and the Indo-Pacific area.
Yes.
However, that we launched a fund in a Nordic area a couple of years ago, which is focused on investment from Japan to the startup in the region, and taking the opportunity, visited many countries and regions. And I found that the many connectivity projects are now preparing. And the key point is that the financial and fiscal support by the European Union's available, and a public-private partnership in infrastructure project is not so easy from the viewpoint of financial viability. Therefore, that the existence of a full-fledged fiscal support, including subsidy by the Brussels, is a very key. And secondly, that also the very important is that professional management of this fund of 3C initiative. That unnecessary interference by the many governments sometimes is very cumbersome, and also sometimes is making trouble. Therefore, that leaving that professional management of the fund to play a role of a catalyst for the inviting private sector's money to the project, it's really important. Therefore, the role of this fund management of the 3C Initiative Fund will be a very key. And thirdly, that I understand that the potential of the economic growth of this region is a larger than a conventional member, traditional member of the European Unions. Therefore, the good potential of the region. And we already identified that the many projects to be financed by ourselves to this region. Therefore, I'm really excited to participate to 3C initiative from outside the European Union, outside the region.
Okay, thank you. Maybe one thing I wanted to pick up from the previous discussion, EU was mentioned a couple of times. most of the countries in 3Cs initiative are actually so-called net receivers if we discount Austria. Why couldn't we just ask money from EU connectivity funds, from cohesion funds, and just rely on European Union on that sense? Because it's also supposedly both the goal of the connectivity funds and also the goal of cohesion funds to help us pick up the pace. Maybe from somebody from the ministry's side? Why would we need this additional project?
If I may start, I think it's not an alternative. It never was meant to be an alternative. And actually, we have been underlining from the very first day of the initiative when it started politically, back in 2015, Polish president and Croatian president started organizing us at the first summit we had in Dubrovnik 2016. And from the very beginning, there was these questions. Is it some form of an alternative to the European Union itself? Do we want to create some other form of political cooperation that would be at odds with the EU? And this was also criticized by some that were not so in favor of this regional cooperation from this standpoint, to which we have been always replying. It was never meant to be an alternative. It's a stronger cooperation in the region between the countries that have so many things in common: historical background, level of development, history of fighting and overthrowing communist regime. This is, in fact, what unites us, and what wasn't adequately explored before 2015. The potential that we have in the region right now in the countries of the 3Cs initiative is over 112 million people. If we add to it one day Western Balkans, if we add partners from Eastern Partnership like Ukraine, like Moldova, they're also very interested in cooperating with us, we will be population-wise larger than Russia, which is a huge economic potential. In order for this potential to work, we need to use every opportunity that we have. And these opportunities are obviously with the national budgets when it comes to financing infrastructure. That's always the source number one. With the European Union funds, cohesion funds, connectivity funds, all the instruments that we have now under the recovery plan, this is also a very formidable element of that. But at the same time, if we would just leave it all to the European Union, then it would mean that we renounce the responsibility that we all have as political leaders to shape the development, to shape the economy, to shape the future of our countries, of our respective nations. We can't renounce that. We actually need to seize these opportunities. We need to work together. And this potential for regional cooperation, we have been observing that in other parts of Europe. We have, for example, countries of Northern Europe, countries of Scandinavia cooperating very closely together, countries of Benelux, the same thing. Why shouldn't we do it in Central Europe? There was no reason to do it. Actually, if we would just forget about it, this would mean that we are not thinking, we're not using these opportunities that we have the obligation to do. So if we are able to combine it, and one of the speakers before was also highlighting that, if we are using these synergies, public funding from national budgets, EU budgets, international financial institution, and fund and other initiatives that are organized between the governments of like-minded countries in the region, only then we are able to develop in a pace that is available to us. What Matej said in the beginning, the IMF estimates that within just this decade we need to spend additional 600 or 650 billion euros just to catch up with the level of development of infrastructure with the Western and Northern Europe. So this is a lot of money to be spent. And every source must be used if we want to actually achieve that goal. And this is actually possible. If we did the maths, if we add all the elements that we can use, this can be done. What the last 16, 17 years since the 10 countries of Central Europe joined the EU show that we were able to catch up with the West much faster than it was anticipated. So if we make even stronger effort now, this is what we do in the 3Cs initiative, This is absolutely doable, absolutely feasible. In 2030, we can be much, much closer to the level of development with countries such as Germany, France, Netherlands, and so on. This is the goal.
Mr. Mihelič, how would you, if you see a list of projects that need to be developed, how would you decide which one would the ministry appeal on this time or that time, and how would you put those things together? EU funds, 3Cs initiative, also probably money from your state pocket.
As you already said, the best thing about the fund is that we can combine it great with other EU instruments. I think EU Cohesion Fund is and will stay the primary investment way for our infrastructure. But on the other hand, we already said that IMF carried out the analysis, and if we just close a half of the gap between the West, we need by 2030 about 600 million. We already know that if we see on the EU budget and cohesion budget, we know it's not attainable. And we have to add some other financial product to reach it. And I think the best way is if we combine all of this, and we have also to have in mind that it's in accordance also with EU policies. The projects, it's nice that they are also green, that they are also sustainable. So I think that are two very important things. But if we choose projects, I think when the initiative was established, the main goal was interconnectivities, so all those cross-border projects who can be replied in other countries, who has some benefits for other countries. So we see all our projects a little bit broader to have effects also to other countries, to other investors. So I think the main thing, or the important thing is, of course, railway infrastructure.
As I understand, you also have some specific examples that you could maybe, to make it more understandable, what kind of things you do with the money, with 3C's money.
Of course, we have some projects already identified. One of them is second railway track between Divača and Koper. This is a part we can solve the bottleneck of the connectivity from our railway infrastructure. And as a colleague already said, all the countries which are connected with our part of the grid will benefit from it. All parts which are at the time connected to our Luka Koper harbor will benefit from it. So one part of the project will bring much benefits to other countries. That's one project. Another one also from railway infrastructure around Ljubljana. Both of the projects are worth about 1 billion, a little bit more. We have another one for gas connectivity between Hungary and Slovenia, which will impact also a broader region. And the fourth one from the side of infrastructure is a project Synchrogrid. It's a smart energy grid project. I think it's a good example of best practice. And I think it's a project which all other countries can also implement in their region.
Mr. Boyse.
So just as an outside observer, we're of course not a member of this exclusive club of the 3Cs Initiative member states, but we like to think of ourselves as the best friends. But as one of the things we've actually found so ingenious about the 3Cs Initiative when it was first conceived was this unique public-private partnership idea, which sort of picked up what had the potential to fill niches. Because I mean, okay, the European recovery funds, wonderful. National budgets, wonderful. International, the EIB or the EBRD, etc., all wonderful. Those are all great sources of investment. for infrastructure. However, the needs that the IMF identified were so great and sometimes the timelines that these other sources of funds involve are also not always immediate. And one of the genius or the ingenious elements of the investment fund is that they're able to act relatively quickly and pick up niches that may not necessarily be covered as easily or as quickly by the recovery funds or the national development programs or whatever else, and that's what actually the funds has already done is they've picked up, they've identified interesting sort of niche investment projects which have multiplier effects in the three sectors: transport, digital, and energy, and can do it like now or within a relatively short period of time, as opposed to sometimes how long it takes to approve a railroad project, or a road project. I mean, sometimes these take a long time. They're very political and they drag on, and they're incredibly important and they were absolutely necessary, but sometimes they just take a while. And so this ability to sort of for the private sector looks at these all these project proposals and they say this one really makes sense, and it wouldn't necessarily be funded by some of the other sources of capital out there, which was always I think one of the ingenious sort of elements of the concept in the beginning.
US has partnerships all around the world. Can you give any examples of something similar?
Let's see. I mean, there's the most obvious one is the Marshall Plan, but that was a long time ago, from 1948 to 1951, and that was but that also had multiplier effects, massive multiplier effects in terms of infrastructure. I mean, in the meantime, of course, the thing about the 3Cs initiative is there are sort of higher income countries or middle income countries, and so we haven't tended to work with middle income countries as much because we tend to work in the lower income world now. Because there's more need there, and the middle income countries are able to access the market and have access to capital more easily than they might otherwise have. But the Congress gave the Development Finance Corporation an explicit mandate to work in this area because of the importance of the region, because of this unique kind of coalition of countries that have come together to tackle this issue, and the concept behind it they found very compelling. And so gave a sort of DFC can work in this area when they would not otherwise be able to do so because they would focus on lower income countries. And so they're working. I mean, we're working with Poland, Romania, and Bulgaria in the energy area, in the nuclear energy area. That's not you would consider it 3Cs even if it's not necessarily under the rubric of 3Cs because it's in the nuclear area, but for civil nuclear energy. But this is a little bit of new territory, but it's promising, and it has so much potential, which is why we're enthusiastic about it, bullish about it.
Mr. Nierada, back to Tokyo. What would be success for Japan? What attracts Japan in this region? Why? Well, we're far away from you, and maybe you're not as global as the US in that sense. Why? Why would Japan want to invest here? Far away from you, and maybe you're not as global as the US in that sense. That's the relay is quite interesting. But
yes, we see that this region, especially Central and the Eastern European region, has a huge potential, as I say, and they have the free access to single market to European unions, and you have good workforces, young population, and a good base for technology. Therefore, that we already launched the fund in the Nordic region, and we're going to embark on the new fund to be built in Central and Eastern Europe, probably by the end of this year. And we have also a lot of experience in making financial support to the infrastructure through that PPP, public-private partnership. And a friend from the US referred to that. We have been working very closely with the US DFC on the different regions, like Indo-Pacific, and small island countries really heavily damaged by the COVID. But the infrastructure building, like the submarine cable building in Pacific Island countries. And also we are now engaged in a reforming of the power utility companies in the Pacific Island countries. And also in terms of their financial support to the connectivity project, historically we have been working on the Greater Mekong area on a cross-border connectivity project in ASEAN. Therefore, that we are going to apply this experience to this region and compare with the less developing countries in ASEAN that you are more advantageous, because I say that you have a huge, good advantage of potential of the workforce and the technology base. Therefore, that as a government institution, JBIC is now mobilizing the Japanese private investors to the region, and we're going to be a spearhead on this, mobilizing this Japanese private money to the region, and this is a very different from the quality of the investment from China. Therefore, you can compare the difference between our investment and Chinese investment in the region very quickly.
How tensely can you feel the competition with China in that sense? Or maybe also from other actors, how often you see that China is trying to tap into the same I don't know, underdeveloped or things that need to be developed in infrastructure, offering their money with their certain strings attached. Mr. Nierada, would you like to comment on that? Yes, because, well, we clearly see that there's a need to build connections with Japan as well. But maybe then coming to the private, because private sector people have been sitting quietly here and getting a bit maybe frustrated for not having their things to say. How did you first encounter this initiative, and what was your initial reaction when you heard that there's this kind of fund?
So, from my point of view, I like the regional approaches. Within the whole European Union, we know that there are some specifics. Scandinavia, Benelux, it's because of history and all those things. Visegrad Group, 3Cs initiative. So I think those countries have something in common, and when we will not have too many of them, it's really efficient. And about the fund, I have to say, it's good to have diversity. So it's good to have access to different types of financing. And that's why I say it's perfect to have such a fund dedicated to this initiative. Yeah, happy to talk about the potential overlap, because I really believe that digital infrastructure is something what is needed. And you can see it now during the COVID time, that practically many of the companies went for the home offices. And now, without having a good, perfectly fiber connection for video conferences, you were lost. And this is something what really we need to understand, that the digital infrastructure is key for the future development and good competitiveness of European companies, countries, citizens.
Actually, one very personal question, because as a user, I notice sometimes that the internet connection in eastern side of Europe is a lot faster than in western side. So do you think we are underdeveloped in that sense as well, or maybe?
So I have to say, our technology is 0G. So we say we are very efficient with respect to the energy consumption, etc. So we need just small energy to send. That's why our sensors can send, for example, 5 years without being charged. So this is something else. It's sustainable. But I have to say, yes, I'm not an expert in telco, in the 5Gs, etc. But my feeling is also that maybe because of the communism and later development of the telco infrastructures or investments in our countries or in the Central European countries or 3Cs initiative countries, the connection is better. And the quality of the networks is better. So when I benchmark Central Europe to Germany, I have to say it's really impossible or nearly impossible in Germany to have a video call on highway. In the other countries, it's quite good, it's acceptable.
More tangible side of the connections. Sir Warsewicz, when was it the first time somebody came up to you with a project called 3Cs, and what have you made out of it so far?
Yeah, maybe some comments for that discussion, because first of all, maybe would like to just say for the current situation of the world, today not compete the company each other, we compete by a chain of logistics. That chain of logistics after the COVID is very important. We saw that it was disturbed of the chain of logistics. We have the problem of the production, movement of the good, and so on. That's why for our hand, for our perspective, it's very important to we are compete together for the company or for the country as well, because in the logistics is a three factors issue is very important. First of all, delivery goods on time, on place, on good price. And for today, if you just not improve our infrastructure condition, we will never compete with the other rest of the Europe or the country. That's why the potential of the demographic potential, economical potential, and the geographical potential is a very perfect to very strongly deliver in this region, which will be benefit of the citizen of every countries of them. That this barrier is a very infrastructure barrier to improving and improving of the competitive, improving the price and quality for the client is a key issue for the future. That's why that's the initiative. If we be improving investment, despite on the different funds, EU funds, other funds, it's very necessary that we have to invest as quick as possible, because the world is running. We have to catch up the rest of the Europe and the rest of the world. We need it. We're very good position at that moment, that we just, as a private sector, we need improving infrastructure to be more developed and be benefits for our company, for our country and the citizens, as said before.
Maybe since different investors were mentioned and also the C word like China was mentioned, I'd like to ask from Mr. Zakonjšek, can you see that there's competition between investors, and sometimes some of them have different intentions, and how would that affect the region?
Well, first of all, I think that we have to first realize that there is many more projects than there is available funds. So there is plenty of room for all investors, being European, being foreign. There is nothing bad about investments. What is actually essential for that is that how the investments are made, on what kind of rules investments are based on what is the background in the terms of the project preparations, the respect for the environmental standards, social standards, fiscal responsibility, and that's the key. If there is a clarity on those aspects, then every investor should be welcome if this investor invests according to the predefined rules and according to the standards which are agreed. And that's why what was already mentioned with the speakers before, it's so essential that all the initiatives, such as the 3 Cs, is closely coordinated and in harmony with other EU funds, which were also mentioned, because this is the basis. And then we do not have this problem of choosing which investors and so on, where every investor, private, public, foreign, European, has its equal access according to the predefined rules. And I think that is the key.
Are the rules predefined enough nowadays in European side of the, well, transport community or infrastructure community?
Well, in the terms of, first of all, geography, it is predefined in the terms of the TEN-T networks. So the TEN-T networks in EU and even beyond, because there is also the extension of the TEN-T networks, is very well defined with the core and the comprehensive network. So this is the geographical scope. And secondly, regarding the rules that governs the investments, of course, is also what we have the European legislation when it comes to the social standards, transport and everything else. So I think the combination of those two offers a very good and very solid background for these issues to be looked in that way.
Mr. Nierada, what kind of projects have you picked so far from the initiative, and how would you choose, and why does this project or initiative give you special guarantees?
Now the fund, yeah, I think it's again we are coming back to this point that the fund is purely commercial. So indeed, the fund has looked on this list of 3 Cs priority projects, but as it was actually discussed here, many of them are very large-scale infrastructure projects which can be executed primarily by the particular state, hopefully cooperating with each other, but using all kind of full-size funding coming from the budget of the states, coming from the European funds that we mentioned before. Now, the 3 Cs investment fund is, just to put it in the perspective, it was also mentioned here that the rough estimate of all the investment needs in only these 3 sectors is about 600 billion euro, only to catch up with the western part of the European Union. Now, the fund is currently about $1 billion already committed. We believe it should have about 3 to these. You see, it's really marginal. It's not even 1%. But still, it's actually money that matters. We make sure, the fund is making sure it's money well spent. So what the 3 projects that have been announced are happily in one of each sectors. One is the first one was actually investment in the locomotive leasing and the railcard leasing company. And I'll come back to that later because I think it's actually very interesting, very good example of to give you a feeling, a grip of the particular differences between what is the responsibility, if you like, or expectation of the state, the governmental actors, and how the fund can benefit. Then the second one was in the company named Green Energy. Is actually a very interesting setup of the cloud computing, of the data center, which is not only the data center on its own with the potential to roll out, because key characteristic of each investor is that it has to make an impact on at least 2 countries in the region. It cannot be just one investment in I don't know, in Estonia for that matter, or in Poland or in Slovenia, but it has to be a clear path of actually rolling it out and benefit the other countries as well. So, the cloud computing, the data center is something that is still missing. The independent data center is still missing in the region. It's a perfect opportunity for do that business. And on top of that, it's actually a very smart data center, but it also reuse the energy it's being spent to actually power all the computers. So it's actually taking the heat back and producing it, giving it back to the network. And the third is actually a portfolio of solar panel farms, plants that are being rolled out in a number of countries in the region. So it's actually benefiting the changing of the energy generation structure. And we know in our region we have been dependent on the fossil fuels, and it needs to be changed in a way. And that's one of the interesting way how to contribute to this target. But quickly coming to the rail card or railways experience, I think it's perfect. The railway network is absolutely key to be developed in the entire region, because coming back to this Port of Copper example, it's actually the shortest way to get the goods to Europe from Far East, because it's the first. It's very interesting harbour, and I've seen a number of container terminals, and I could see the huge potential of the Copper Harbour to expand. So instead of actually sailing around Europe to drop the cargo in Amsterdam or in Hamburg, you have just 1 day or 2 days of sail from Suez Canal to Port of Copper when you hop it on the railway, and you can ship it around. And it's as it was mentioned here, the logistics is immensely important in current economy and the development. But this is something that can be done predominantly by using these large funds from the budget, combining these. The fund cannot really add that much value. Maybe becoming one of a trigger, maybe help to comment on financial structuring this, but it's not per se an investment that can be done by a fund of the size. It's simply too large. Now the fund can actually bring the rail cards. We can, and this is what we are doing. We are investing in the business that will optimize the price for using the railways, so everyone will benefit. So it's a clear win-win situation. All the companies, all the logistic companies, all the actual companies that are importing these goods or shipping them, they will be able to benefit because the overall cost will be cheaper, and it will provide for our competitive advantage for the region.
Well, when we look at the bigger picture, it's clear that the whole system in the East needs to be developed. I don't know, but if we take a tangible thing like railway, it would be very nice if I could take a train, or if cargo enterprise could just rent a railway car, and send some stuff to Ljubljana directly from Thailand. On the other hand, you have all mentioned, or basically many of you have mentioned, that there's lack of funding. So what about internal competition between the member countries or the participating countries? For example, Mr. Verlič, aren't you afraid that maybe there won't be railway development here, but instead there are 2 countries picked, or 3 countries picked, would be Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, and the money would move there?
Yeah, it's a good question, and also very nice, because we are from, how to say, we lived in the system which didn't have, how to say, market mind orientation. So, but I think that the competition is good. And one of the rules of the European Union is that there is a free market. And I remember that especially in the railway freight transport, there was a lot of work, because to see the opening of the railway track for other companies, that was, I remember, back in 90s for the Slovenian Railways, really a big question. But now I think when we have the same concept, the same standards. I think with the good railway network, I think we don't have to be afraid of competition. I think that everything, I think it's, as Mr. Zakonjšek said, I think when you have a good project, well-prepared project, then I'm not afraid that that there will be found no funds. And as we discuss about 3Cs initiative, I think that we have so much common topics that there is no, I think there is no worry about that. This that we have to be afraid of who will get some more money or less money, because this is why we have such initiative to coordinate the projects and to have some common goals, which is very important. And for us as a railway company, of course, two words are now very popular, but it's we have to be green and we have to be digital. And I think especially in the railway sector, the meaning of green is very important, because we have to be aware also about the climate change. And I think that until 2050, backbone of the transport network, it has to be railways, in terms of passenger transport and in terms in railway freight traffic, or let's say in logistics. We have to have that also in mind. So I think that the projects for us, that means if we will have the more capacity on the railway network, as Mr. Mihelič said, second track Divača-Koper in Slovenia, that means from existing 60 trains per day, that capacity will raise up to 200 trains per day. For us as a railway company, that means, of course, we need new rolling stock in freight. But of course, if we are preparing for us in development of passenger traffic or international passenger traffic, which is also important in railway, it's, you know, nowadays between Ljubljana, Zagreb and Belgrade, you don't have a train, a passenger train. So we have to do also in that respect something. So this is also our how to say, our task as a railway operator. And digitalization, of course, automatization of the process of the signaling with this European ERTMS project, so common signaling system throughout Europe. This is huge, how to say, progress in respect of railway barriers, technical barriers. And of course, you know, we also have to do something in ticketing system for passengers. We are very well aware how we can buy the tickets for a plane, but this is not the case in the railway system. So it's a lot of how to say, I would say, challenges we can do, and of course, as I said at the beginning, it's no money, no funny, I said.
Just to say, I think that we need really a paradigm shift when it comes to understanding of investments in different modes of transport. Because we have still this thinking that, you know, €1 invested in roads is €1 less invested in rail, and so on. 1 kilometer of rail will never make money in itself. But it is a network effect which transport networks and the energy networks and the digital networks bring. The biggest user of energy, or one of the biggest users of energy, is transport, for example. The digital technology is the next one, looking at how the transport is changing. So what we need to think is how the roads connect to the rail, how the rail connects to the ports. And that is why the rail networks are really such a crucial part to invest, because in the last 30 years, they were not invested sufficiently. And only if we will have the rail network, which actually brings the goods from the ports like what says the port of Koper or other ports in the region, all the way to Central Europe, for that to be connections with the inland waterways on Danube, on Sava, and that to be connected with modern roads, then we will see this network positive effect of any infrastructure investment.
Do people in transport community, especially in different countries, understand it, or do they still need some convincing in it? How understanding are they?
You would not need transport community if everybody would understand itself. I think that there is a need for the international forum, also such as this, to bring people together to actually, look at things from the regional perspective, from the international perspective, because I think that this is the highlight of that. So I think there is a need for the coordinated actions. Now, what is the best way of coordinating is part of the discussion, but I think there is a need for the coordinated approach, such as the 3Cs initiative, such as Transport Community, European Union, or beyond.
What about countries? Because how do you explain to your transport entrepreneurs, for example, from Poland's perspective, that we're giving money to this fund, which is going to fund the railway built between Zagreb and Ljubljana?
We get these questions a lot. Obviously, and even in a closer proximity to Poland, for example, investment in Baltic countries that help build connections to develop ports there. So we are getting questions. Why are you investing in projects that may effectively be competitive to ports in Poland? The answer is simple. We are investing in various projects in the region because we want to make the region stronger. We no longer look at this as an isolated country that has just interest within its own borders. This is not the nature of modern economy. When we speak about connectivity, about cross-border connections, if we want our ports to be effective, it's not for these ports to just supply the goods to Poland and nowhere else. And the same goes for ports outside. If we make ports in Lithuania, in Latvia, in Estonia more effective, they will be able to bring more goods to the region, which we are also going to benefit from. The same goes for ports in the Adriatic and Balkans. And I had the opportunity to be at the port of Koper a couple of months ago. We discussed various opportunities also with the railway network, with involvement of Polish companies there. And this is beneficial for all the region. We have to face the fact that for almost 5 decades after World War II, the infrastructure has been developing very efficiently, at a very steady pace in the West, in the countries that were part of the European communities at the time. And in our part of Europe, it wasn't the case. Well, there was some interconnectivity, but it was limited. There were various standards, and obviously the quality was not good enough. So now, when we are investing in it, we are catching up. This gap we need to fill will still be an obstacle for development of the economy for the next at least few years. I hope this is a smaller amount than larger. But if we are investing and if we are supporting projects at our neighboring countries with similar level of development, with similar structure of economy, with similar needs as well, we are helping ourselves effectively. We are looking at this at a larger picture, not just purely within the borders. Without such outlook, any international cooperation wouldn't be possible, because otherwise every project could be challenged by people who are saying it's better to just fund something at our home, not looking at effects that it might have regionally. And I believe that if we look at the projects that already been supported, both from the fund, which Paweł Nierada was mentioning, but also from the public, for the public money. For example, we are building north-south connections, the Rail Baltica project, which I mentioned in the beginning, but also we are building a hugely important project called Via Carpatia that's going to connect the Baltic, north countries in the Baltic region through Poland, down through Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, down to Greece. And this is going to give the whole region, and not just within the cities, because, for example, Ukraine is also going to use it very, very, very efficiently, we will have access to much larger capacity of transporting goods, of getting connected to global economy, and our region, which still has competitive edge when it comes to prices of transport of shipments compared to some other countries in the Western Europe, will benefit from that. So we are looking at this from this perspective, and I believe there is not many doubts among public opinion that this is important. This is the way to go.
Mr. Mihelič, how understanding are people at Slovenian Railways when you say that Slovenia is going to invest money, your state money, to that fund to Rail Baltic, for example?
I totally agree with the approach of Poland, because if we, as Mr. Zakonjšek already said, we have to look at the railway infrastructure as a whole, not just as a part. And we as Slovenia, if I look at into the competitive way to other projects and to other countries, I'm not scared, because Slovenia is the last part to a very important port of Luka Koper, the most efficient port in the region. So I think we have to look a little bit broader, and people, I think, agree with us the way we are doing. So we are aiming, our goal is to invest in our railway infrastructure in the next 30 years about 12 to 13 billion euro. So we have to improve our network, and the benefits, of course, the most of the benefits will be, of course, by the side of the cargo, will be, of course, for other countries. For example, Poland, Hungary, Slovakia, and all those countries in the Central and Eastern Europe will benefit from it. But we see it as a whole project, and with a cooperation with other countries, with other investors, I see it as the right way to improve this. So we are doing our best, investing as much as we can from our own budget, from EU cohesion funds. So that's our focus. Railway system has to be improved. We have to raise our capacity, our quality of the network, and I think we are on the right way.
Matej, Boyse, when you look, well, you have outsiders look also at us. How well behaved are the countries in the fund or the countries in the initiative when it comes to competing for resources?
I'm not going to comment on how well behaved they are, but I will last night at dinner, the mayor of Bled told an interesting story about how the owner of the person who built the hotel down on the Toplica down on the lake used to commute daily from Bled to Trieste 100 years ago, and of course that's not possible today, I don't think, or not very easily. And of course, the stories that used to, where, for example, it took less time to travel by train from Warsaw to Ljubljana in 1910 than it does today. These sorts of things, the fact that you're trying to kind of, like get back to where you were during the Habsburg period is actually a great, is phenomenal. But in terms of, but to answer your question though, I must say there's still in our, we're an outsider here, and we don't have nearly the kind of, we don't deal with this in the same way that the member states do, but we interact on a very regular basis because this is a high priority for us. The building of resilience, the building of connectivity, the sort of the strengthening of this part of Europe, because this part of Europe still is, there are foreign powers that seek to influence your area of the world, and they're not democracies, and so to the extent that we can be supportive in strengthening this part of the world through infrastructure, which is one of the vectors through which some of these malign actors have sought and in fact achieved influence in other parts of the world, and including here in this region, to the extent that we can support that, your desire to take a Western approach to this rather than become under the influence of dictatorships or autocrats or whatever, we'd like to do so. That's why we interact. So we pay attention to this, and we try to be as supportive as we can. Some of the countries, though, we've noticed an evolution over time where the more countries become familiar with this and the more they understand it, then some of the more traditional ways of thinking are starting to break down. For example, there are some countries that say, well, we really want this in our country, and they've really sort of, why have we not gotten any investments yet? This is not happening fast enough because, and of course, that's understandable in a sense. Obviously, countries, if they invest in a fund, and these are not contributions to a fund, these are investments in a fund because there is going to be an ROI, a return on investment, and there will be. So it's not a contribution. These are investments that are sensible and that will make them get more money out of it than when they put into it. But this mentality sometimes it's a result of people who've never worked in the private sector. Sometimes it's a result of people who, have been maybe worked for the government for a long time or whatever, and they're not as familiar with how the private sector works. And they take a narrower approach. And sometimes, of course, if you're a politician, you want to bring home the road to your country and not to have it go next door, right? So I mean, it's sort of understandable, but you do get, there's an evolution. We were observing an evolution in some of the thinking of the where they be coming around to this idea. Yes, this is better for the region. It will come around. The more money goes into the fund, the more other sources of funding there will be from sovereign wealth funds or pension funds or institutional investors of various sorts, and that'll then increase the capital, and then it'll make it go further, etc., and into more countries, and it'll lift all the boats, as it were. So I mean, it takes a while, but I think the sort of the knowledge and the understanding is growing, and the appreciation, and all the funds the investments that have been made so far do actually cross over and touch virtually every fund, every country, including the countries that have not actually invested in the fund. So for those countries, and they know which ones they are, Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Austria in this particular case, they have actually they've actually benefited as well. So the approach is not sort of narrow. You can only get something if you put something in, but rather there's an attempt to build the consensus and to build the understanding and to build kind of the support so that they see this for what it is, as a real opportunity to kind of like to provide extra injections of capital in key sort of areas relatively quickly that will complement all the other sources of investment that are flowing into, or that can be accessed, or that are flowing into the region.
Would you dare to encourage them to broaden the geographic scope of that fund to, I don't know, further east to Ukraine or Moldova?
That's a matter for the members of the Three Seas Initiative. We're, as I said, not a member of this exclusive club, so that's for them to decide. If they decide that they want to do so, I mean, great. I mean, for example, at the Sofia Summit, we had Greece participating as a guest for the first time. President of Greece was there. And we had also, I mean, these are not countries from further east or whatever, but we had the French were there, the British were there, the Japanese were there. And this was actually quite significant because we never had that at any of the summits before. But as far as the other, I mean, I would defer really to to the member states to answer that question. In our conversations, we've heard that desire to consolidate and to sort of make sure that the current structure of 12 works and is like really sort of like moving along smartly before they start opening it up to others. But I mean, that's a matter for them to decide. Yeah.
So what do the member states think? Would you encourage Greeks to aim at the money as well?
Very briefly, so I don't want to hijack the floor too much, but in general, the fund and the initiative is supposed to collectively support the members of it, the members, 12 countries that have started it. But obviously, we are not excluding a possibility to cooperate with external partners, even those that are not members of the initiative. For example, there is a general principle that we adopted that we only are creating the initiative out of the countries that are members of the EU, because it makes it easier to, for example, the regulatory framework is the same, and it makes many things much easier. But it doesn't mean that we are closing possibility to cooperate, for example, with Ukraine, which has a lot of potential. It has access to the Black Sea, which is obviously very significant, and it can help us build competitive edge, regionally speaking. When it comes to decisions of the fund, yet again, I don't have anything. I have no involvement in decision making. Politicians are not involved. It's commercially managed. But all these projects that are being chosen, they are being chosen because of the market value. And obviously, if they are applicable to some extent also to the countries outside of the 12 members, their value is even higher. So I don't see any reason why these countries would be also to benefit to some extent, even not being formally members.
Anybody else in the panel has feelings about it?
I think it's speaking again for the fund. It's highly unlikely that this particular fund would actually step outside the 3Cs jurisdiction, because it's completely different predominantly from the risk perspective, actually investing projects within the EU countries, in particular within the 3Cs initiative countries as they are now, which are pretty close, pretty similar in terms of risk profiles and everything else. Now, investing in Ukraine or Moldova, for that matter, actually can be very interesting, but we would be then talking about something completely different, and it would probably apply to a completely different type of investors. So I think this fund as such, it's clearly looking on the projects if these projects have a commercial benefit based on cooperating with the countries from outside the 3Cs region is even better. But this is something different to actually make investment in outside the 3Cs region. But I just wanted to share, we were discussing about previously about how is it possible, how to explain, how to manage that we are going to invest our money, if you like, in, I don't know, not in Slovenia, but in Croatia or in Hungary. Now, the real life example that we have had as a BGK, we actually were a shareholder, and we were cooperating closely with the Deepwater Sea container terminal in Gdańsk, which is a very large, very quickly developing container terminal. And they were actually shipping these hundreds of trains of containers that could be up to almost 1 kilometer long. And they were actually slowly crawling south. But when they were reaching the South Polish border, on the other side, for whatever reason, they could not accept trains that long. Yeah? So they had to be split into 2 or 3 separate trains, which was killing the huge part of the business, because contractors, when they would see, okay, I will use the container terminal in Gdańsk, but then I will have to pay this little extra and waste a day on the Polish border. No, I will go someplace else. Now, improving the network on the other side of the outside Poland would hugely improve the Polish economy and the Polish business. And I think, luckily, that's my experience from the working together with our friends from other development banks, development institutions in the region during the setting up the fund, and then working together with the fund. We all here within the 3Cs countries, within the 3Cs economies, we are genuinely in this unique opportunity that working together is a win-win situation. everyone will get better off. And what is particularly reassuring, it's not only I'm sorry to say that, not only the politicians that are actually starting to talk about it, but the last summit in Sofia was, from my perspective, a huge quality improvement in terms of actually real business people or association of businesses actually realizing that it's not just talking that these are real opportunities to build on, but we have to use that, we have to talk together and realize how together we can move forward. Yeah?
Does anybody from the audience have a question, comment? For one, there's option, but no? Okay. So I will ask myself to wrap it up, starting from Mr. Zakonjšek and then from everybody else, and maybe ending with Mr. Nierada. In 10 years or 20 years' time, what would you consider success and what would you consider failure of this initiative and fund?
Well, I think I can speak about success and then the failure, exactly everything opposite. I think the success will be if we have the multimodal, in my respect, of course, I'm talking about transport, but if we have the multimodal network that connects what I said before, trains with ports, ports with trains and then the roads, and that can have predictability for businesses, that it has a predictability for people who want to travel, that we actually have the genuine network that works across the entire region of the 3 Cs, and of course it also encompasses other actors that are interested in that initiative. But I think the best example of that would be what was said before, a concrete example of going with the ship to the port of Koper, putting the things on the modern rail, taking it all the way to the markets in Central Europe, taking it to the rivers, so to have a really genuine multimodal transport system, which of course also means an energy system that can support that, and the digital network that can support everything that needs to be digitalized on its way. And in 20 years, most of the things will be digitalized. So I think all these three, let's say, the connecting industries needs to be planned as well as executed together. And everything opposite for the failure.
Okay, this I think is the main question, because why we're doing this? We're doing, I like to say, for the dividing for the two perspectives. One for the citizen as a passengers, as a client. People, because the synonym of the quality of life is transportation, quality of transportation. It means, of course, the rolling stock, time deliver, and so on. If you'd like to see in the future how will be the benefit effects of them, we'll just estimate it by increasing of the quality of life. If you just increasing quality of life, first of all, increasing of quality for the people, for the, let's say, common people, let's say, it will be success. In other hand, from the business perspective, what client needed from us, as a freight company? We need delivery quicker, cheaper, and faster, cheaper, and also in the right place. And that's why if you just deliver them the better offer, with just including quicker, cheaper, and the right place, we will succeed.
Well, I think that we will evaluate the success of this initiative. That is my personal view. In 20 or 30 years, how many or how much funds will we attract to this project?
And from my point of view, I have to say it will be good to show that this initiative could help us to get back to the positions which Europe is losing currently. And maybe this initiative could be an example, and success of this initiative could be an example how to show maybe to the older European Union countries that also the countries which are newer there could contribute and be a positive example, not as now, where many of those countries are not treated too much as a positive examples of affinity to the European Union. And I think really we need to get back to the positions as Europeans, because we are losing the positions. We are losing the positions in the key areas, in classical areas, but also in the new technologies, etc. Thanks.
Well, I would just take this, what was said before, I hope in 10 years we will be a completely different place in terms of connectivity and all these aspects. But I would take this even further and say the connectivity also on the sort of personal human level. So, because I've never been to Bled, and I think from my perspective, what I mean, it would be much better than I'm very keen on skiing, for instance. And it's not that common in Poland that people realize that it's not only France or Austria or Italy to go for skiing, but it's actually also a good place to go skiing in Slovenia, which is only 1 hour flight from Warsaw and what was here, 30 minutes ride from the airport, or for that matter in Bulgaria. So we would have this connectivity not only on this infrastructure, but this will actually extend in much broader perspective of our life. We will see, and we will be able to build on that, to take the inspirations and all the fresh dynamics of the new entrance to the European Union and build on that in much broader aspects.
I think everything will be better. In this view, I think if we are looking on those three sectors, transport, energy, and digitalization, there are so many opportunities to make a great deal. And in this way, I think it will be a great success if we will reach our better connectivity, but on a green way, zero emission way, in accordance with all the EU regulations like Fit for 55 and other policies. But if we measure this, if we are successful, I think it's the most important other things. How much money do we raise? And the other thing, what we do with the money. So will the money answer to the gap between the Central Eastern Europe and the Western Europe? But if I'm looking a little bit forward, of course, we need that the whole Europe, also the Western, will develop itself. So we all will develop. But I hope we will develop a little bit better and faster.
My thought exactly. We need to be a little bit better, a little bit faster, because we need to... this is the principle of cohesion. This is why we joined the EU in the first place, to ensure that people in our countries, in Central Europe, are able to reach the same quality of life, the same level that our countries are able to reach, the same GDP per capita, the same level of resources. And this is still the goal. 3Cs initiative, regional cooperation, other formats are just a tool to achieve this goal. And I think we can obviously be measuring the success of the initiative by measuring volume of goods that are being transported, density of grid networks, of transport, of energy, volume that is being used. This is obviously helpful. This is a measure that can tell us how quick we are advancing. But in the end, what really matters is the quality of life of the people. And if we will be able to catch up a little bit faster than the Western Europe, because this is still what we need to do, maybe 2030, maybe 2035, I am absolutely certain we will be able to finally make Europe fully united on the same level of quality of life. This is the ultimate goal of European integration, not just 3Cs initiative, but EU as a whole.
I agree with everything that everyone has said, and there's not much left to say other than, I mean, that the fund has met its goals, and it's the return on investment is as predicted in the double digits. That Europe is, you know, that the central the 3 Cs member states have you know, reached the level of development of Western Europe, which had the good fortune of not having to live under communism for so many half a century, etc. And so and, you know, the quality of life increases and reaches that level too. And that I mean, yeah. This I mean, at the rate at which it's working, it takes a while to get such an unwieldy sort of, you know, new initiative off the ground. But it's actually it's gaining steam, and it's encouraging. And if it continues at the trend it is, and all the other and all the member states invest and they invest more because they see that this is actually a higher ROI than they might be getting elsewhere, then how can it not succeed?
And now to Mr. Meada to Tokyo. Seems a bit difficult to get connection with Tokyo, so.
Yes, in 2019, Japan chaired the G20 and introduced quality infrastructure discipline of G20, which includes inclusiveness, transparency, and the rule of the law. Also that we participated to the Blue Dot Network. The originally EU was sponsored, and we are a founding member of this network. And this is a system of the verification of the G20 discipline of quality infrastructure. And I do hope that this Blue Dot Network to be applied to the Blue 3C initiative. Secondly, take an example of the Rail Baltica project. The Japanese companies showed its interest. For example, the Hitachi acquired the Ansaldo of Italy, and they are now creating a European hub of a manufacturing center. And then they are interested in the switching and operation system and loading stock, etc. And also Hitachi also acquired the ABB, and they're also expanding their business in Europe. Therefore, that there are a good opportunity for those companies to be involved in this initiative. Thank you.
Well, thank you all. It seems that nobody wanted to contemplate on possibility of failure. So let's hope we will all succeed and the member countries won't bicker that much over money and funds, and all investors get their investments back with a good revenue. Well, thank you, and thank you to everybody in the audience as well.